Welcome back. I am Kimile. You're listening to Heal with Kimile podcast. I want to talk about what makes a relationship real. And you might not believe me when I tell you, but the only way to get a real relationship is to have some sort of conflict. It's to have some sort of test. And until that love or trust is challenged, people really don't stay together. They don't really last. You've got to have a little bit of tension or a little bit of breakdown to test the relationship to see if it's really worth staying with. So when clients come to me and they're so in love and they just met the love of their life and they're so happy, and I'm happy for them. I really want them to have a loving relationship and it works out. But until it really has a breakdown, we really don't know if it's going to last. So I tell them, look, don't commit. Don't think you're going to be happily ever after with this person until you have your first real fight or your first real challenge. Because until there's a challenge, you don't know how they're going to handle it. Look, we all turn into children when we get triggered, right? It's interesting. Most people have the same kind of fight over and over and over. And usually it's because they haven't dealt with something inside of themselves and they allow themselves to get triggered. So when we get triggered, the amygdala, that little part of our brain that is the fight, flight, or freeze, that part of our brain gets hijacked and we are no longer ourselves. We resort to our old tactics of being brats, and we start either fighting each other, hurling insults, trying to hurt them too. We get defensive, or we pout or we pull away. And now, prove it, make me. Now we're little kids doing that. And some people stonewall, some people just get downright ugly. Some people leave, they run away, they can't handle it. You're not perfect now, so off with your head. You're out of my life. That's the entitled, again, little king, little queen kind of thing that happens. So I do feel like that we all have a way of, we turn into our little brat selves. And if you can't handle that in your partner, if you can't handle how they show up, or if it's just something that's just the worst thing you've ever gone through, then you're probably not going to stay with that person. So you need to see how that person is on their worst day. I tell men, look, she's got to have her first period with you. So she needs to go through her PMS week. She needs to have the cramp. She needs to have all that stuff. And then you got to see what you're really going to deal with, because that's real life. When you get committed and you're with each other every day and you're going to get married, you have to understand how people really operate. In the beginning, it's infatuation. You're excited to see each other and you have eye contact and you can't wait to touch each other and you want to be together all the time. But there has to be something that makes it real. And conflict typically does that. Some recent clients that I've talked to, this is an interesting conflict. So this sweet lady, amazing, beautiful single mom, has gone through a lot, taken her time, just really been smart about her situation as she's gotten divorced. And she received some emails. She received some communication from strangers, like she doesn't even know them. In fact, it wasn't even her. It was one of her best friends. So her friend received some information about this new man that she's fallen in love with. And he's allegedly a monster and all the things he does. And, and of course, somebody knows him because they're talking about how he woos women or takes them to the same places or whatever. Yeah, because he's trying to impress them. But long story short, so she's getting all this information about what a bad guy this is. And she should run. She should not waste time with him, et cetera. And she asked me what she should do. And I said, maybe this is the first thing they've ever really had a disagreement about or some sort of obstacle. And so I said, well, this is going to be a test. This is going to be the first test you've had in this relationship, because the 3 months that have been going on so far have been bliss. She's been extremely happy, going through a great time with him. And she probably didn't handle it the right way. I think she texted and instead of, talking face to face, but this triggered her. Of course, if you're in love with someone and you hear some bad things about the person you're in love with, you're going to go, oh no, am I being, fooled? Am I being catfished? Is this a really bad guy? That early stage of love, everybody's on guard because we don't want the love to go away. We want it to be real. But then there's that part of everybody that has that sense that nothing's going to last forever. And we have that, we're all jaded. If we've been burned, we've been divorced, we're jaded. So that little jaded part of her came up and it did remind her of her previous marriage. And she couldn't trust this guy. He wasn't trustworthy. He cheated on her. So all of this stuff started going around in her head. And she then did not know what to do with this current relationship because her past is now triggered. And when our past gets triggered, it's like that past unresolved issue is superimposed on the present time relationship. And she started wanting to attack him or get mad at him or accuse him. Are you doing this? Did you do that? But that's natural. That's just 100% normal. And he felt ambushed, of course. And then he handled it poorly because he's triggered. Now he's triggered and he's defending himself. He doesn't want to defend himself. Like, I don't owe you an explanation. This is someone in my past that's obviously trying to ruin my reputation. And so he's upset that she doesn't just have this trust for him. And of course she doesn't trust you yet. You don't know each other yet, right? So all this just, again, it's the perfect storm, right? And so when a couple comes in and there's something going on like that inside of the relationship, I say, okay, stop talking. You can fight at home. No more fighting with me, but stop talking. And I want you both to look at what you're being reminded of, because something from your past is really what the problem is. If you're triggered, you're not present anymore. The second you get triggered, you're not right here, right now. You're in some past painful, unresolved memory, and you're mad at whoever hurt you back then. And that is being projected in the present time on your partner, on your new love interest. And they're like, I didn't do that. They're defending themselves. The last thing you want to do is defend yourself from something you didn't do. Okay. So what you have to do is pull away from that person and really start working on you. If you're triggered, to me, that's actually a gift. If you get triggered by something, now you know where your work is. Do you have trust issues? Where did the trust issue begin? Are you afraid of being betrayed? Of course, most people are. But when did you get betrayed? And how did you deal with it then? And is it happening now? Maybe, maybe not. But you can't know the truth until you deal with your past. And then I say to people, this means you're probably not relationship ready. Not that you can't get there, but you need to pull back and kind of work on yourself a little bit so you can understand and see what really upsets you. Because inevitably, someone's going to hit that button. That's just normal. Everyone has triggers. It's how you handle your trigger. It's how you respond to being triggered. That's on you. If you're getting triggered, the minute you're triggered, this is up to you to fix. Nobody else can fix it for you. And so both sides need to pull back and say, okay, what if this person's just the button pusher? That they're not really that bad, sick, and wrong person. What if they're just the button pusher? What button are they pushing? Because that upsets in me. People say, oh, it's normal to be angry. No, not all the time. So what have they said? What have they done? What have they reminded you of? And until you can really look at that, that's where your therapy is. That's where your healing must go. Because until you can get yourself to where you're not triggered anymore and then have a rational conversation, the relationship is going to be on hold until that trigger is worked out. And that's why the same fight happens over and over and over again, because your trigger from the past never gets resolved. You just maybe, go on a new date, or, you go to bed, you sleep, and you don't talk about it anymore. You just avoid that conversation. Again, it's still lingering. It's like a sore that's not going to go away. And the minute somebody brings that up or someone says something to you, boom, it's right there. And then you're reacting again. But you're not reacting from the present time. You're reacting like you did when you were a little kid. And so that's what becomes destructive. And people do stupid things when they're triggered. I think the most important skill set is to have the ability to self-regulate your emotions. If you don't have self-regulations, you're hurting people. You don't mean to, but you are. So it really is critical that if you want to have a healthy relationship, you've got to deal with whatever your triggers are. And how do you know what your triggers are? You got to get in a relationship to find out. So, because it's got to be heated with love. It's got to be, an emotional moment. It's got to be real. It can't be, that you're just doing therapy. I've got so many clients that break up with someone. They've stayed single for a year or two, and they did a lot of therapy and they worked through those moments. But how do you know if you really got over those? You need to test yourself. Again, get in a new relationship. And if that person triggers you, well, obviously you're not completely over that. Or maybe you're handling it differently. Hopefully you are. But if you're feeling guilty all the time or angry all the time, or you're just having a hard time trusting that person or trusting yourself, chances are you're triggered. A lot of people are in denial about it. I'm not triggered. I'm fine. No, everything's okay. But yet they aren't connected. They're not close. When people walk in, their body language just gives them away. They slide away from each other. I've got chairs that have wheels on them. And so clients just kind of slide away from each other. They're not connected. They're not close. No eye contact. They just look like they're resting bitch faces. They're angry. They're just pissed off. And so a lot of it is I put people, in the chairs and I say, okay, turn and face each other. And so what is it that's come up that really hasn't been resolved? And there's always something. There's always something that hasn't been spoken. Why don't you bring that up? Why don't you say something? Well, because the last time I did, she went off or he went off and I'm afraid. And because we're walking around each other's little minefields. We're walking around each other's triggers, you see. And to me, if you're going to stay with somebody, you want to be a catalyst for healing. You want to be a catalyst to help them overcome their past trauma and vice versa. And so the way to do that is to know, just straight out the gate, you're going to trigger your partner. You're going to trigger that person. They're going to trigger you. That is exactly what happens. And if you don't have an open dialogue, or if you're not able to handle yourself, if you get triggered in a way that's mature, it can cost you the relationship, or it can cost you the real intimacy in the relationship, because now the relationship is walking on eggshells, right? If you are afraid to bring something up or say something because you're going to trigger them, now you're hostage to that. And it's still running you, you know? I have women that have been abused. Men get abused too, sexually abused, right? And so if there's some sort of trauma like that, it's like now the self-expression, the love, the fun, none of that can happen until that trigger is handled. And I do believe that, it doesn't mean that the person has to, fully heal before they can fall in love again and have a healthy relationship. But you have to at least have the idea or the knowledge that I have some issues. I've got some triggers. And when I get triggered, a healthy, way to deal with that is just to say, look, I'm triggered by some past stuff and the present stuff. I'm going to take some space. I'm going to work that through. So I'm not leaving the relationship. I'm just taking some time. If I have a little time out, I can kind of process it. If not, I'm going to act out. I'm going to turn into the child again that I don't want to be. Or maybe we have an agreement when we're calm, and I try and set some boundaries up with my couples on how to fight. We're all going to fight. Fighting is just part of the relationship. And I want to avoid that. I think that it's healthy to really be able to stand up for yourself. But when it just is this repetitive cycle because we're never resolving anything, that's not healthy. But the non-resolved fights, the fights we have over and over and over, aren't about the relationship issues. They are all about your childhood stuff you've never resolved. And then you're projecting that crap onto each other. And that's what breaks people up, is there's never resolved. And there can't be resolved within your relationship because you haven't resolved the past. And so that past issue is going to break up what could be a phenomenal relationship for you in the present time because you haven't resolved it from your past. And then people bounce from person to person to person because obviously it's the person that's going to fix them. And that doesn't exist either. There's also this thing about, I call it self-soothing or still nursing. But when people are, they're hooked on alcohol or they're taking lots of medications, they can't feel. They don't want to feel. And so they numb themselves off. They don't want to, experience any emotion. And so if they have something uncomfortable happen, they want to just go make themselves feel better with and Band-Aid it. It's just a Band-Aid. It's their vice. And everybody's got a vice. I know that. But if you've got someone who drinks daily, they're taking painkillers routinely, or they're binge watching movies, or, they have their little routine of numbing out, even if they're binge eating, that person is not truly able to be in touch with their feelings or emotions. So you want to be careful with dating someone like that because it isn't real and they can't handle difficult life. They're in too much pain. I also feel like people that are in pain need something to make themselves feel better. They need a vice. So that is whatever shot of whiskey it is. There's lots of shots of whiskeys, but that's going to limit your ability to connect and really have an intimate relationship with that person because they're not capable of feeling. They don't want to feel. So, just consider that. But also the ones that, just keep asking for grace. Just give me grace. Just give me grace. I just need some grace. I love the idea of giving grace. I think that's great. But if you've been dating someone for 18 months, and this is going on with another client right now, love her, but she's been dating for 18 months and, it's just not moving forward. And I'm watching her continue to get consumed by this guy, very successful, very powerful, high profile opportunity with business and stuff. But usually there's a reciprocity. And, he's been through divorce. He's got 3 or 4 children. One of them doesn't like my client. And of course, it's the female and there's loyalty with mommy. All that stuff's normal. But he's just not able to pull the trigger and commit because he doesn't want to offend the daughter. All these things are more important or more of a concern for him than making sure he doesn't lose her, right? My client. So he's just not ready. The bottom line is he's just not ready for commitment. And that's okay. That's totally okay. What's not okay is this, just don't leave. And I feel like he's turned her into a drug. And I think people do this. I think people turn each other into a drug because, she's beautiful. They're having great sex. She makes them look good in the room. She's, high caliber lady, beautiful lady. And I feel like can be a whole new person with her. But he just can't make a family out of it. And she'll do a lot of things for his children and a lot of things for him. and he rarely comes to her house. She's always down there helping him. So there's just not a balance there. So when a person is, again, using you to make themselves feel better, that's a problem. And so you don't want to become someone's therapist or, feel good and offering someone grace all the time. You can be great. You can give them grace. You just can't be unconditional with them and keep giving them everything. Look, resentments happen. If you're resentful of your partner, it's because you probably gave more than they gave. And that's inevitable. It's just the obvious thing. You have to get something. You can't just give all the time. You've got to have reciprocity. For it to work long term, there must be balance. There has to be balance. Just know that there's a way out of this routine fight. There's a way out of this rut in a relationship. Usually people are so happy and they're so in love until something happens. And then that one moment tends to just set the tone the rest of the relationship. And everything was great until that happened. Everything was great until he did this or she did that. And or something happened to a child or something. But those moments can be worked through. And they have their place. I'm not saying you shouldn't stop and grieve and deal with those things, but it doesn't have to steer the rest of the relationship. So if you've got any of this stuff going on, or you want to just come in and talk about your situation, I'd be happy to help. You can find me at healwithkimile.com. That's HEAL with KIMILE.com. Thank you. God bless and have a peaceful day. Bye.